have a picture. It's a bit pixelated is the picture that I've printed off. And we're going to use flour and modelling paste so that he sets nice and hard. Now, because he's in quite a deep grey or black, I'm not sure which it is, I've got some ready dyed black flour and modelling paste. So I've just got the Renshaw's one here. It's a lot easier than dyeing it yourself because it just goes grey. You won't ever end up with it black. And then I've got a white one for adding to create a bit more grey, and for his flesh colour we'll dye that up. So we'll start with the black, and what we're going to do is just start with his legs, and we're going to give his legs some time to set once we've done them before we do the rest of his body. So I'm just going to knead this till it softens. I do apologise, I've got food colouring all over my hands. Now I've printed this off to the size that I want to do it, so it's quite large as this one for one of my models. I usually do them a little bit smaller, so you can do them smaller. I'm going to do his legs as one piece so that it gives it a bit more support than if we were doing it as two separate legs. So I'm just rolling to get my cracks out, and what I'm going to do is just roll it so that it's thinner at one end and thicker at the other. The black does get everywhere, as you can see. Try and create a similar shape to what he has on here. Now he does have very thin legs. I'm not too worried about getting them quite as thin because I'd rather have them a little bit thicker than them snapping. So I'm going to cut the straight bit at the bottom. I'm just going to squash that down a little bit where I want them to come to, and then I'm going to look at where his jacket comes on here, and I'm going to cut them to there, just making sure we've got a nice smooth curve here. And then I'm just going to run the back of my knife down the centre to separate them and give us like two legs. So I'm not using the blade because I'll end up cutting all the way through, which I don't want to do. So if the line's too sharp, just rub your finger gently up and down it to sort of smooth it out a little bit, round the lines off. And you can do the same on the back. Now my figure's going to be sitting on a cake board, so I'm not going to be able to put anything through the figure that goes into the cake, but you can put a dowel through the centre if it's not going to be eaten. That will support it. For this one, we're going to put a dowel through the centre, but it's not going to come further out than the bottom of him, just with us standing him on a hard surface. So we might find that he's very difficult to stand upright without toppling. So for mine, what I'm going to do is, rather than worrying about how top heavy he is and that he's going to topple, I'm going to build things that go behind him on the cake so that he will lean against something that he can't fall over. So now we want a couple of little shoes. And what I'm going to do is try and make them as one piece. It's probably more than I need here. And what I'm going to do is roll it so it's nice and thin at the top, squashing it out at the bottom. And we're not going to need as much as we've got here, but we're going to trim it down a little bit. And I'm going to trim so that we've got a nice straight line there. And these are going to be his feet that are coming out from either side. And then we're going to trim at the top. Again, we're going to put a line down the centre so that it separates, or makes them look like the two separate shoes, and I'm just pulling them in slightly. So if you want them to be a little bit longer, just pull them out a little bit more, making sure they're nice and pointy like his shoes are. And then we will attach them to the bottom. So I'm going to put a skewer through to keep them in place, or a cocktail stick I think I'll use for this one actually. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water on the top. You can use edible glue. If you want little marks where his heels are, just put a little indentation in either side. I'm going to put my cocktail stick through his legs. Twist if you want as you're pushing through, otherwise what you'll find is sometimes you squash your legs and they concertina up a little bit. So I want this to stick out the same height as the shoes themselves are, so we'll push that on there now. I'm not going to stand him up, I'm just putting him on to his feet for a few minutes so that I know that they are flat on the bottom. So I'm just pushing the feet onto the board to make sure they're flat. And then what I'm going to do is now add another stick into the top so that we know his body's going to be attached nice and firmly. So it doesn't need to go in too far. Again, I'm just keeping it next to my picture to see if it's a similar size. And I'm going to let that dry now. So I'll probably leave this one overnight just to make sure it is nice and hard. So I've let my legs dry overnight. You don't have to, but it is easier if they're hard, otherwise you'll find that you're going to misshape them when we're working on the next bit. So we've got another large piece of the black modelling paste. So taking our next piece, we're going to roll it slightly so that it becomes a little bit narrower at the bottom than at the top. Now, it's quite a large piece of modelling paste is this one, so if you prefer to do it with Rice Krispie treats in the middle, you can do, that's absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do is cut a straight edge at the bottom so that it will fit onto his legs like so. Now I just want it so that it's a little bit wider than the tops of his legs. At the moment mine's about the same, so I'm just going to push it down a little bit to widen it out a little bit, and then we'll have a look again. So that's now a little bit wider than the tops of his trousers. I also want it to be a similar size to on here, so what I'm going to do is now increase it at the top. So we're just going to widen it up here, and I'm just going to sharpen off the corners where his shoulders would be. He's got really wide shoulders, and it can be rounded at the back. Now just keep checking against your picture. Now mine's probably going to be a little bit smaller than on the picture, but that's fine. And what I'm going to do is try and create a little bit of a crater here where we're going to sit his head. So just slightly where you know the head is going to go, just like that. And I'm going to put a little bit of water on the top of his legs. If you want to use something stronger, you can use royal icing as a bit of a glue, that's absolutely fine. I'm just going to insert that in. Now just make sure you stand it up so you can see what angle it's at. So now he won't stand up as he is because of the weight that I've got on the top of his body. So for mine, when I stick him on the board that he's going on, I'm going to create like a bit of background so he leans against something. But like I say, you can put a skewer all the way through that comes out of his legs so that you can skewer him into a cake. Now what I'm going to do is stick, because I'm going to have one arm up, I'm going to stick another cocktail stick in whereabouts I want his arm to go, otherwise it's going to be difficult for it to support itself. So I'm just going to push him, just going gently. So it doesn't want to poke out quite as much as that, so we'll push it in a little bit further. Again, if you're unsure of size, just hold it against your picture. My body's quite big now. What I'm going to do now is just draw a line down the front where his zip would go. So I'm just going to make a light mark so I can see where the centre line is. I'm just doing that with my cocktail stick. And then what I'm going to do is with my knife, I'm just going to run a little line down the side of that. And again down the other side. And we can always put little lines across if you want it to look a bit more realistic, like a zip. Or if you're happy with just the two lines down, that's fine. And I'm just going to leave that for a couple of hours just for it to stiffen up a little bit before I do any more work on it. So I've rolled some flesh colour, again just in my modelling paste, just to create a small ball for his head. Again, just check size wise. Now his head's quite tiny compared to his body, and what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of water in there, and we're just going to squash it in place. And we're going to put his mouth in first of all. So we're going to start with a straight line coming across, and what we're going to do is now open that out just using this little tool. I will put links in the description below the video for where all my tools are from. So I'm going to take a little bit more flesh colour and we're going to create him a nose now. Now he's got quite a long pointy nose, so I'm just going to start by rolling and then cutting. Oh, do this somewhere where you can see. And what I'm going to do is try and make it a little bit more triangular in shape. It almost looks a bit like a beak, a bird's beak, I think. And then we're going to stick a bit of water on the end of that, and it's going to go above his mouth like that. And I'm just going to push that on in place with the modelling tool. Now you can see the lines a little bit, so what I'm going to do is just wet that a little bit and then try smoothing that in. And I'm going to try and give him some little nostrils just under here, either side. Now I don't know how well you can see that from there. So now we need his eyes, so I'm just going to, again using the back of my tool, I'm going to push in. Now it's a little bit sticky where I've got his nose, so I'm just going to put a bit of corn flour on the end of my tool. Now his eyes are reasonably close to the top of his head, and we're going to try and create little hollows. His head's a tiny bit flat up here, so what I'm going to do is just keep hold of it while I'm indenting the eye sockets. Or you might find it easier to use a balling tool, whichever one you prefer. I'm just going to push the top of his eyes, or pinch the top of his eyes a little bit, where his eyebrows will go. And again, I'm going to find a smaller balling tool now. And push in the centre of the eyes. I'm going to get some white now. So you want 2 little white balls now to go in the eye sockets, and I'm just going to put a little bit of water in each eye socket and drop these in place like so. Just make sure they don't lose the shape too much. If they look a little bit oval in shape, that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to take a bit more flesh now to give him some eyelids. So I'm just going to take a really small amount and I'm going to roll it, or 2 amounts. I'm going to roll them nice and thin so that they'll go under each eye. And then you can push it in place. So taking 2 small round balls, we're going to make his ears, and they're quite far around the back of his head, so I'm going to put a little bit of water either side near the back. I'm not going to put them right at the bottom because his scarf will end up covering them up if we put them too far down. So I think about that. And what I'll do is just taking the bottom of my paintbrush, I'm just going to stick that in the centre of each ear like that. And I'm just going to take a small amount of black that we're going to roll nice and thin, that's going to fit into his mouth. So it doesn't want to be any longer than his actual mouth, so I might just take a tiny bit off. And we're just going to slot that in place. And I'm just going to push that around a little bit. And then we're going to give him a really small line of teeth, so back to some white. So for the teeth, just a really small amount. I'm going to roll it nice and thin. It's probably a bit much I've got there. And we're just going to again put a little bit of water along the top of the open bit of his mouth. And we're going to push this up into the top. Just going to use my paintbrush to make sure it's where I want it to go. And then using the cocktail stick, we're just going to put a couple of little indentations in for his actual teeth. If you think it looks alright without these, and don't worry about adding them, you can leave it without. So I'm just going to rosy up his cheeks now. Okay, now I'll put the link to where I've got these from online. You can see mine are a bit past the best now because they've had a bit of a beating. Just using a dry brush, I always keep the same one for my pink. I'm just going to put a little bit of pink on my brush, and I'm just going to dab that gently onto his face. Just be careful you don't get it on anywhere that's wet, because it leaves a funny streak. So we're going to give him some eyebrows now, and we're going to go back to our black, And I'm just going to wet this little arch that we've got on the top of each eye socket. And we're going to roll a small amount of black so it's thin at either end. And then what we'll do is we'll cut it in half. If I can keep hold of it. And I'm just going to have a look at how long it is against the top of his eyebrow. So I'm just going to lengthen it now a tiny bit. And then we're going to stick this across the top. Pushing it down a little bit. So you can move them around to create different expressions. So I'm just going to take a bit of blue food colour in now, and a really fine brush, so I've got a number 0 brush, and I'm just going to mix it with a little bit of water in the lid, and then we're going to paint in some small eyes. So just depending which direction you want him to look will depend on whereabouts you want his eyes to go. So I'm trying to do mine nearest to the top. And then we'll do the same for the other one. And we're going to put a little black dot in the centre of each. Now you can paint it on if you want, or you can add it in fondant. Now if you're doing it in fondant, we literally just need some tiny, tiny bits. So now his face is done, we'll work on his scarf. I forgot about doing his collar, so we'll do his collar before adding the scarf. So we want a bit more of our black. We're just going to roll out, and I'm just going to cut out a circle. I'm going to use a smaller circle to cut out from the middle. And then we're going to cut out a little V from the front. And we're going to see if this fits now around. So I might need to stretch that a little bit to get it round. That's fine. It wants to stick quite far out because when we've got his scarf on, we're going to find that you can't see a lot of it. So I'm just going to squash it down a little bit to stretch it. And I'll add water around this bit that comes around his neck now. So I'm pushing that on in place. So I've not pulled it in too tight to his face, so the scarf doesn't fully cover it up. And then we're just going to take a couple of V's out from further up. So take one out there and one out to match at the other side. So taking a light grey, so I've just added a bit of white to my black. We're just going to roll this out for his scarf. Now I'm not going to make the scarf as one long piece, I don't think. I think we'll make it in sections. So cut a little bit off to start with, and we'll just cut one long piece. And the first piece will go underneath, so we'll stick it to this side of him like so. So I want it to come to about here in length, so I'm gonna trim it here. And I've not added the stripes in fondant, we're gonna paint these on. So I'm tucking that in, down that side. Like so. I'm going to roll this a bit thinner, otherwise it's going to bulk out a lot around his neck. And the tricky bit here is getting it done quick enough before it dries out, so mine already feels like it's drying out quite a bit. Now what I'm going to do is just cut a little thin piece to go around the neck at the front, and what I'm going to do is just curve it round at either end for the underneath section of the scarf. And we're just going to put this around there, like so. So I've rolled it a little bit longer for this next piece. So we're going to cut a long piece. It's the same thickness as the bit of scarf we've got that's dangling. You can use a pizza cutter if you prefer. And we're going to start it up next to his ear. Bringing it round. Trying not to cover too much of his face with it if you can. I think I've covered quite a bit of his face there. Round the back. Trying not to cover up too much of his ear there. I'm bringing it down, and then I'm just going to trim it where I want it to end, so I'll bring it to about there. And I'm just going to stick a bit of water on the back of it, try and straighten it up. Obviously, if you want to lean it against something so it's upright so the scarf drops directly downwards, then you can do. And then we're going to paint that up. And in fact, before we paint it up, what we'll do is we'll cut a tiny little square for the top of his zipper. Is it a zipper? Zip. So just a small square, and it's just going to go in here. Just get that in there. I'm just going to put a small ball of glitter just above it as well. Like that. So now we want some black paint. So we've just got a black sugar flare colour now. Just using the thinner brush again. And we're literally just going to paint on stripes. So now the stripes are painted on, we're just going to add some metallic paint. So this is just a food one, a rainbow dust one. And I'm just going to paint up the top of his zip. And then we're going to paint the zip itself. Again, use a thin paintbrush. And I'm just going to let that dry for a little bit before I start adding his arms, otherwise what you'll find is that you stick your fingers in the paint and then touch him on his face and you'll end up with black fingerprints everywhere. Okay, so we'll leave that for a couple of hours now to dry. So we're going to take a bit more of the black again for his arm, and I'm going to roll it nice and slim, keeping it larger at one end than at the other. We'll use the larger end for up near the top of his jacket and the smaller end for his sleeve, bottom of his sleeve. So I'm just going to cut the end off so it's about level with the bottom of his jacket. It should be fine. And I'm just going to poke a little hole in the centre to make it a little bit easier for me to add his hand in. I'm just flattening this top bit up here that we're going to put against his shoulder, and I'm just going to stick some water on the inside of this arm. I'm going to push that in place on there, and I'm just pushing that down, making sure it's all nice and tight. Now if you find you stretch it a little bit while you've done that, like what I have done, just take a little bit extra off the bottom. For the next arm, we're going to create the same shape to start with, and you can either put it in the same position or you can fold them in front of him, or I'm going to try and do one so that it's pointing upwards. I'm going to start by trying to get it a similar size to this one so that they both match. And I'm going to, rather than squashing this bit down that way, I'm going to leave it this way because it's going to attach slightly differently. So I'm just sort of squashing it like that. And we'll just see whereabouts this comes to on here. So we're going to attach like that, although it's not stuck down properly yet. And I'm just going to put an indentation where I want his elbow to go. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to bend it. And then we're going to bend the arm into that position, like so. Okay, so I think that's about right. So we're going to put a little hole in the top. Take that off a second, where his hand's going to go. And then we're going to wet this bit so we can stick it onto the body. If for any reason it's dropping, just prop something behind it to hold it in place. So we're going back to a bit of the flesh colour. We don't need a huge amount for his hands. And what I'm going to do is stick a little cocktail stick now into each arm. And we don't need very much of one, so I'm just going to snap off a little bit. So again, if you're adding these, it's not going to be edible. So just make sure anybody knows. So there's a little bit stuck out on that one. This one we don't want very much stuck out because I think I'm going to change the position of his hand a little bit. So we're going to start with a ball. I'm going to roll a little bit. That will become his wrist up here. And then we're going to flatten this bit for his fingers. I'm keeping this bit reasonably chunky still. So what we're going to do now is just cut out a little V where his thumb would go. So I'm going to cut out a V at that side, and then we're going to cut in his fingers. I'll just cut that extra little bit off the end like that. And I'm just trimming off the tiny little points. And opening them up a little bit if you can. Just squash them more into a finger shape. And then I'm just going to press into the centre of his hand, and again at the bottom of where his fingers go. Oops. And pull them together a little bit, and we're going to pull them round like so, and we're going to leave one pointing upwards, and we'll fold his thumb in slightly, just adding a little bit of water to the bottom, and we're going to carefully stick the wrist onto the cocktail stick now, so do be careful when you're doing this bit. So it has fattened his wrist slightly, so we're just going to push that on the best we can. Apologies if I've put my head in shot. And I'm going to bend his hand upwards a little bit like that. And then you can use something to prop it up if it's moving. So I've just got a little bag of silver or gold balls here, but they'll do the job for just holding it in place. So now onto the second hand. Let's move that up there a little bit. Again, we're going to start by creating his wrist. Might be a bit big this one, but we'll see. So we're going to do exactly the same as we did with the other one, where we're going to create a thumb and fingers. We're just going to position these how we want them. So you can either leave it completely down, or you can put it in a fist, or I think I'm going to have mine so that it's outwards, just like that. And then if I want, I can put his hand leaning on a minion. Again, a bit of water on there to hold it in place, or up the sleeve. And we're just going to leave that then to set. So I'll put a picture of it finished for you. Thank you for watching.
If you liked this video and would like to see more, please click on the images of the other videos suggested. Also, please do subscribe to my channel using the button at the bottom